Alright, so I want to get into the new patch that's coming out by the time I upload this video for Teamfight Tactics in patch 10.9. So I'll skip through the opening and kind of work my way into the meat here. First off, we got some new arenas, so you can take a look at those, see if any are worth your money to buy. But before we kind of start getting into the nitty-gritty, let's talk about kind of the big overarching change that's coming with this patch. So the last couple of patches, they've mostly dealt with the economy and rebalancing the economy to make the game play a little better. Now what they're getting into is an issue they found that a lot of the builds in the game right now revolve around getting tier 3 champions to 3 stars, and there are a lot of builds that's primary focus is getting to 3-star champions at tier 3. So to do this, they've done a number of things, but to start off, shop drop rates have changed. Long story short, you're going to see more 1-star and 2 stars across the board, and slightly less 3 stars. So a lot of the time when you were trying to find your 3-star, you're now more likely to find 1 stars and 2 stars. The probably biggest points of this, at level 4, it goes from 15% to 10% on 3-star, and also 1 stars went up another 10%. So even less chance of getting 2 stars at level 4. This is pretty notable. The other notable is at level 7, it's now a 5% increase on 1 stars. So what does that mean? It means you're going to see more 3 stars at tier 1 and tier 2, and less 3 stars at tier 3. To put it simply, nearly every build relied on trying to 3-star a tier 3 champion. Shaco, Syndra, Rumble, anybody I'm missing? There's Master Yi. There were so many champions at tier 3 that everyone was just trying to hoard up to blow people out. So the plan is to see slightly less tier 3 champions getting 3-starred. Item drop changes. They changed. So if you were full on your item slot and you tried to sell a champion with an item, your item would get deleted. That is not true anymore. You just don't sell that champion. Same thing with trying to pick up items while your item thing was full. That's relevant because of one of the new galaxies, which we'll get to in a second. The other big change, you always will get 1 small orb in first 3 PvE rounds. Why is this important? This is actually very, very important. Those small orbs would either contain gold or a Nikos, or more champions. So outside of getting a Nikos in there, you always had more gold when you were getting a small orb. So the problem came up, what if you got all regular orbs? Means you never got any gold. You never got any bonus gold, and that tends to be very rough. It makes it very, very, very difficult to get 10 gold at 2-3. It's almost impossible. Like it's incredibly difficult to get 10 gold at 2-3, and the idea of getting 10 gold at 2-2 wasn't going to happen unless you were just going to straight up like open fort and just die, which they don't want you doing. So this makes a lot of the consistency of the early game much better, because 4 items, that was rough. That was really rough for a lot of the top players, especially when you get up in the Challenger. New galaxies. So we have 2 new galaxies. Treasure Trove. Every minion drops an orb. I love this. I love everything about this. This is fun to me. Makes Carousel not as brutal. If every PvE wave is dropping like 4 or 5 items, like, yeah, I'm gonna have a party on this. This pretty much makes so you can force any build. You can force any build anytime if this is true. It'll be fun, trust me. The other one is Star Cluster. So this one's an interesting one. So on the first, second, and third carousel, well, let's go one by one. On the first carousel, all the champions are tier 1 and 2 star. On the second carousel, they're all tier 2 and 2 star. On the third carousel, they're all tier 3 and 3 star. Yeah, this sounds fun. This sounds... Well, I shouldn't say it sounds fun. There's some points to this. Usually on the first carousel, you grab for item. This might make it so on the first carousel, you're going to grab for a carry champion. So probably like Graves, Za, what are some other good early game champions? Yeah, just you might end up just grabbing an early game champion to help carry you through to victory. The other point is that third carousel is going to be nutty. Like, that third carousel is going to determine your build. It used to be pretty early in that round where you would try to pick out your build. If you're getting a tier 3 champion at 2 star on the third carousel, your build should probably be determined by whatever that champion is. You should be instantly trying to get that champion and make a really good build with that champion. Alright. Galaxy odds, so they rebalanced all the galaxy odds, so that way we have more chance at the new ones, slightly less chance at the old ones, including Trade Sector, which came in a little later, and some normal games. So there's going to be a lot more galaxies you're going to be playing more than normal. Okay, trait balance changes. Yeah, this quote pretty much summarizes it. We're lowering the power level of larger vertical traits and buffing some of the smaller supplementary traits to open up more interesting build paths. So from Riot's perspective, everyone was forcing very linear builds and wasn't going anywhere else. Pretty much a lot of the builds you see were like 4/4, so like Mech Infiltrator or Dark Star Vanguard. You just run 4 of something and then 3 or 4 of something else. Or you would run 6 of something like Cyber and just kind of run over people. 6 blades. It's very linear. You're not being particularly creative when you make builds like that. So, their response to this was to lower the top end and buff the bottom end. Thought being that you would see more flexible traits. You'd see more flexes in traits. Now, my thoughts on this is that the real issue is that there were certain champions that were carrying these builds, and these traits were buffing those champions to an obnoxious degree. Shaco, for example. Master Yi, for example. What are some other ones? Those two in particular stand out to me a lot. Jin was another one. A lot of the carry champions were getting so many bonuses from their traits that they were overwhelming people. So I'm not sure how effective this is going to be overall as a change, but I welcome it to see more flexibility. Because to be honest, we've pretty much, in all of Set 3, there hasn't been a lot of new quote-unquote builds. It's pretty much just been the same builds, just one over the other. There hasn't been a lot of creativity there was in a lot of the previous sets. Alright, so let's kind of go in through some of them one by one. Blade Master 6 got a nerf. Blaster 4 got a nerf. That's very insignificant. Brawler was one I wanted to note. Brawler 2 got a buff, but Brawler 4 got a nerf. The nerf isn't much. The buff is a lot. That's a lot for 2 Brawler. That's quite a buff. I would look for like early Brawler to be pretty good in keeping your early game high. Celestial, Celestial 6, yeah, it's 4. Celestial 4 is a bit much. Yeah, Celestial 4 and Celestial 6 was a bit much, so they toned it back. Same thing with Celestial 6, but it's pretty minor. Cyber 6 got a nerf. Cyber is about as linear as you get. You get the 3 Cyber, and then you make a decision whether or not... You get the 3 Cyber in the early game, and then you make a decision whether you want to go to 6 Cyber in the late game based on your items. And it's like, okay, I'll do it. There's nothing lost in going for it. I think this is the second time in a row Cyber 6 has been nerfed, though. So I'm a little worried about how viable this is. I play Cyber 6 kind of a lot, and the reason why I find Cyber to be pretty easy to play is the only really hard part is finding Echo. Itemization is pretty easy. The hard part's when you have to like shift items around and you're trying to carry extra Cyber champions to keep your Cyber buffs, knowing that you want to sell some of the ones you haven't played because they have items on them. That's probably the hardest part of Cyber, but I play it pretty brain dead, to be honest with you. It's very linear to me in how I play it personally. Darkstar's getting an overarching nerf. Darkstar's too powerful. I think I pretty much thought I said this when this set came out. I really like what Darkstar looks like because it's a lot like Shadow, except probably even more powerful than Shadow. Infiltrator. So this is actually a big change. So Infiltrator, there's an Infiltrator 6. I had no idea there was an Infiltrator 6. I've never actually seen Infiltrator 6. But Infiltrator 4 and 6 getting a tiny nerf. Not too significant. Yeah, that's actually not very significant at all. But what's big is the Infiltrator perk, which this is. It'll reset on all takedowns at all levels. This makes Infiltrator 2 a lot like Valkyrie, in my opinion, where you'll have an Infiltrator champion in your build, and you're just like, okay, I'm just going to throw in another Infiltrator. This is notable probably for Cyber, where you have Echo, and it's just like, why not throw in another champion to get Infiltrator? I think of all the changes that we're going to see here, this is the one I think probably has the most opportunity to change the meta. But we'll see. Protector 2 is getting a buff, but 6 is getting a nerf. Considering the buff that we're going to get to on Vanguard, I don't think that the Protector 2 buff is very relevant. It should be better, but it's kind of like, to me. Rebel's getting a nerf at 4 and a nerf at 6. I don't know why they're nerfing Rebel. Whatever. Sorcerer. Sorcerer is getting kind of hit decently. Like the Sorcerer 4 nerf's pretty hard. 45 to 40 is a pretty significant nerf. 80 to 75, not so much. 125 to 120, whatever. But the nerf at Sorcerer 4 hits really hard, I think. And a pretty good nerf to the E-Girls comp that's going around. Same thing with as I was saying, Star Guardian got a similar nerf. This one isn't as juicy as this nerf, but it hits kind of hard. The thing with Star Guardian, you still can't build Star Guardians without tiers. Without tiers, you can't build Star Guardian. Vanguard. This is another one of the bigger changes. So Vanguard 2 goes from 60 to 125 armor. There's a particular champion in here that's getting a buff too in Vanguard that we're going to get to. This is gigantic. If your build includes Wukong as a frontline, you should look to getting another Vanguard, because a Wukong ult can change a fight quite a bit, and Wukong has a shitload of HP. So, like, even a 1-star Wukong with Vanguard 2, he's going to survive to get to his ult, and it's going to be glorious. Starship, we're going to talk about this when we get to Aurelion Soul. But it now gains 40 mana per second instead of 20. We'll get to what this change means later. And the Valkyrie threshold goes from 50 to 40%. Kale is ridiculous. That's literally all I have to say about this. Kale is ridiculous. Some other balance changes. Blade Master. So the bonus attacks for Blade Master got a buff. I actually just played a game with Blade Master 6 and kind of stomped some fools. So I think this might be a good change. I don't know. It's really the only time I've ever played Blade Master 6. I think I've done Blade Master 3 is a flex. Yeah, it's good. We'll see how good it is. Chrono is getting a functionality change. So the way Chrono worked was you got an attack speed boost every 4 seconds. How much it was depended on whether you had 2, 4, or 6 Chrono. Now the increase is a flat rate. You get one at the start of combat. You don't have to wait. You get one at the start of combat. That's something that's been clarified. But you now get it at 8 seconds, 4 seconds, and 2 seconds. I have to math this out. This is I'm doing math while live on stream. Very, very dangerous. 7, so 22. So there should be about a. So if you get to here, there should be a 32. So this is probably like a. Yes. Okay. So this is a nerf at Chrono 4. Should be a buff at Chrono 2 because you start with one. Now, it is kind of a nerf at Chrono 2. It's kind of a buff and kind of a nerf. You start combat with a buff, but you have to wait an extra 4 seconds to get your second buff. So after 8 seconds of combat, you're at the same pace, but at 12 seconds of combat, it's a nerf. Up until 8 seconds, it's a buff. At 8 seconds, it's the same. So I'm going to call it technically a nerf, but it's kind of more of a readjustment. At 4, it is a nerf. I mentally did the math here. Well, technically it isn't a nerf. I'm mathing it. Well, I can't math that. That I can't math. Because you start with a buff. Yeah, I can't math that. But I think I actually, now that I think about it, if you start with the buff, if you start with the combat speed buff, this should in that case be a buff. The only thing is, okay, alright, it's a buff up to 4 seconds. It's a nerf after, yeah, okay, I figured out how it works. It's a buff up to 4 seconds. After 4 seconds, it's a nerf. Yes, I figured it out. Yep, that's exactly how it works. Yeah, got it. So you initially start combat faster, but you're going to be going slower after 4 seconds. The 2 seconds, I don't know. Mathing that's out of my mind. It's probably a nerf because this is such a high number. Eventually, this should scale out to beat this out. I just don't know how long that would take. Either way, I can't imagine there are actually any builds that you play that are Chrono 6. You're either going to play 2 or 4. This is essentially just the only thing I think this really changes is Kale. This allows you to ult with Kale faster. And once Kale starts ulting, like, everything starts dying. So, I think in the reality, despite how they've changed this rework, this is probably a buff because most of the time you're playing Chrono with Kale. There's a few other comps you play it with, but Kale's kind of the big pointer. And in that case, it's probably a buff. Other builds like Cyber, this is probably going to work out more to be a little bit of a nerf. I can't really think of a lot of others. But I kind of like this change because functionally it's kind of how I would like to, I imagine Chrono, but it's such a change at rework. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to figure out how much better it is and what this works better with. My opinion, works better with Kale, probably worse with everything else. Mechs got a bunch of changes. Looking at all of these, it looks like Mech got nerfed, but there's a bunch of changes to the Mech pilots that kind of evens it out. But the big one is the base health got dropped by 300 points. That's kind of cringe. And you don't start with mana anymore, which makes it much harder for Fizz to ult. That was one of the things that I thought made Mech really good, was you pop out Fizz. Fizz has an extra 25 mana for God knows why, and just smashes something in the face, and it's like, okay. Oh, and Rumble, if you have demo, Rumble then stuns something. Okay. That's fine. Yeah, but huge HP nerfs to the Mech. Basically, Mech doesn't tank forever anymore. Alright, but we'll get into some of the Mech pilot changes later. So, champion changes. Overarching, pretty much all of the Tier 1 champions got a buff in some way, with the exception of Graves. Graves got a nerf at 1 star because Graves was annoying at 1 star and kind of beating out their carries they had at Tier 1. So they gave him a nerf, and in return, they buffed him at 3 star. Which you notice, for everything got a buff at 3 star. The big change, I think, at this tier is Leona. The 3 star Leona change from 120 damage reduction to 200 damage reduction, combined with the changes they made to Vanguard, blows my mind. That is actually insane to me, this buff. Leona's basically going to be what she was in set 2, which is like this unkillable tank god that you can't do anything with. This is my opinion. I don't know what to say. The other big change, I have no idea why they're buffing Ziggs again after all the issues they had with Ziggs in the early game, where you give him a Seraphs and he just carries everything because he does so much damage and it's Demolitionist. I don't know why they're buffing him again, but whatever. Grumble. Tier 2 champions. Annie's getting a health buff. Thumbs up. I really like Annie as like a sorcerer champion because she has a tanky ult and she has a ton of HP. So she can be a frontline sorcerer, something sorcerer is greatly lacking. Good change. Oh god, this change. So, when I first read this change, I was kind of under the assumption that it was coming with a nerf. That they would fix this functionally, but they'd also give him a nerf to balance it out. They did not give him a nerf to balance it out. Lucian is probably the best mid-game champion in the game right now. If you give him a red buff, he will carry you right to the end game, where you can trade him out, put the red buff on something else. Like, it is actually absurd how strong red buff Lucian is. Completely absurd. And now they fixed his double tap so that it actually hits things when the target was dead. I honestly can't even this change. I have no idea why they did not put a nerf along with this buff. But whatever. We're going to just have to move on. Sonya got a minor rework, because it used to be she cleansed all buffs. Now she only cleanses stuns, which to me is meaningless that she cleanses stuns, because it's going to be pretty rare that she actually ults and cleanses a stun, whereas cleansing a debuff kind of made sense. The reason why they got rid of it was because of Grievous Wounds, is that it was a heal that was clearing Grievous Wounds, which made no sense to people. I understand. I just don't like it. They also buffed her healing amount, which is frustrating if you were one of the 5 people who thought Protector Mystic was a dumb comp. Whatever. Rockin', I'm going to summarize this change. This change looks complicated. This change isn't that complicated. RFC Recon was bugged. RFC Recon is no longer bugged. Yasuo. Okay, this is probably the change I dislike the most. So Yasuo is one of the few champions with a very unique targeting priority. There aren't actually a lot of champions with unique targeting priorities. The reason that they're getting rid of Yasuo's targeting priority is because he was considered anti-fun. That he would jump on whatever your carry was, kill your carry, and then you would just cry because your carry is dead. In my opinion, that's a mistake. If you don't have defensive items on your carry, you're not playing this game right, in my opinion. You need to have defensive items on your carry to protect your carry from getting smashed. You shouldn't just be able to rely on positioning to save your carry. you need to rely on items to save your carry. This is why you put Quicksilvers, GAs, Trap Claws on your carry to prevent your carry from getting blown up. Yeah, I don't like this change. It ruins the entire point of Yasuo and probably blows up Bang Blows. Like, I don't even think you can play that build anymore. I think Bang Blows just dies because of this change. Because if the targeting priority is no longer going to be the carry, that build just gets flat out smashed. Tier 3 champions. Master Yi, his heal rate is going to be flattened. Buff it 1-star. Buff it 2-star, nerf it 3-star. 1-star Yi is god-awful. 2-star Yi is okay. 3-star Yi was ridiculous. So, I think this was a fine change. Rumble is getting a damage buff. I'm not going to say anything about this. Rumble... The fact that he's a demo and does this much damage, it kind of upsets me. I don't like Demolitionists getting a lot of damage because Demolitionists come with stuns. You should either do stuns or damage. You shouldn't be doing both. Jinx 1-star and 2-star getting a buff for at rocket level. It's interesting because one of the best builds in the game right now is Brawler Blasters, and the carry on Brawler Blasters is Jinx. Yet apparently Jinx is the most underperforming champion in the game. How do I read into that? My opinion is that means that Jinx isn't in enough builds. Which, when you think about what Jinx is, a Blaster Rebel makes sense, because Rebel is unplayable right now. So, you only play her in builds where you have Blasters. Well, the only builds where you have Blasters is Blaster Brawlers. I think I did some kind of experimentation of this, trying to figure out why this was, why people don't run like a Blaster Vanguard build. Why don't people do that? The synergies for a Blaster Brawler just works out better. It's actually pretty basic. There's not much reason outside that. I don't know what to say. It's Blaster Brawler, you just get better synergies than like Vanguard Blaster. You can play Vanguard Blaster, but the synergy is just not there. So what ends up happening is that the only time you see Jinx is in anyone who's playing Blaster 4. And she'll be your carry in Blaster 4. If they want to change her, they have to add another trait to her. Or an origin, I guess. Tier 5 champions, Aurelion Sol. So remember how we said Aurelion Sol, the spaceship trait is now going to gain 40 mana instead of 20 mana? So there was an explanation for this. And the explanation was for this that the only good Aurelion Sol builds that you could make had Seraphs. So I thought about that and was like, okay, so what's the change? The change was they gave Aurelion Sol a Seraphs. So Aurelion Sol now has a Seraphs every time you pick one. Essentially what this means is that the ult comes faster, the ult comes more often, so the ult's going to smash you. We'll have to keep an eye on this, because this could make Rebels good again. Make Rebels great again. Since now you no longer need a Seraphs on Aurelion Sol. Also, interestingly enough, it makes Seraphs kind of useless to put on Aurelion Sol at all. It used to be that each Seraphs was actually very useful to have on Aurelion Sol. It was good to have multiple Seraphs on Aurelion Sol. Now, you don't even put Seraphs on Aurelion Sol because it basically comes with Seraphs. I like the change. Aurelion Sol doesn't get played enough, mostly because it's a Rebel, and Rebels are pretty bad right now. But it's a cool unit. I'd like to see it played more. It's just not very good. Gangplank. Thank God they changed this. This was probably the most annoying thing to me about Gangplank, was that he ulted, and then you waited a second, and then the nuke hit. That was always frustrating to me. I really am glad they changed this delay, so that it makes more sense to me. It feels better to play. And they also gave him an extra 25 starting MP. Gangplank doesn't get played anymore. I got caught the mute. Good job. Xerath, we'll get into Xerath a bit more, but Xerath had a whole bunch of issues with his animations and such. But essentially, he got nerfed because he did a shitload of damage. Pretty simple. One item change, Quicksilver, going from 15 to 10 seconds. So I remember vaguely when they first made Quicksilver so that it wasn't infinite down to 15 seconds. I complained a lot. I take that back. It did nothing. So we'll see if 10 seconds does anything. Star Guardian 3 is now a bronze trait. Ooh, spooky. Wonder what that means. Whole bunch of Xerath changes, or I shouldn't say changes, bug fixes. He had a whole bunch of weird animation issues. Ari now waits till her first orb returns before firing another. Ari was secret tier good in Star Guardians. Like, Ari was really good in a lot of the builds I played with Star Guardians. And a handful of mobile changes we won't go into. Alright, so what does this mean? Well, I guess I can bring up my handy-dandy meta chart. Bam. So this is a list of pretty much most of the metas that you're going to... most of the meta compositions that you will see in the game. So, overall, it's really hard to tell how much everything's going to get changed. Because pretty much all of them, in some way or another, got a nerf. And very few got any buffs. So, for me to go through each of these and tell you that some of these are better, some of these are worse, probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But, a few that I will point out, probably that got a good bit better. Kale. Kale, I think, is probably going to be the dominant composition on this patch. Between the Trange, the Chrono, and Blade Master didn't get changed. I think the change to Chrono doesn't really impact Kale in a negative way. In fact, it probably impacts Kale in a very positive way. So, I do think that this comp will be a lot better. Rebels should also be a good bit better. How much better? We'll see. Jingard, as you're building up your vanguards, in the early game, this should be a better composition. Should be. So one of the issues I often had with this build was like, how do you even transition into and out of it? I think now it should be a little easier if you start with like a few vanguards and you start banking a few more, that you can just pretty easily just go into Jingard. I'd like to see I assume that other builds with Vanguard will see more play. I think you're going to see a lot more Vanguard flexes and builds. Yeah. Probably the most build that's going to change is Cybernetic. I think Cybernetic is going to look a little bit different now. You're still going to see your 6 Cyber, but the other 2 champions are probably going to change. In general, the idea before was just to get Chrono. Just put in the two Chrono champions that made the most sense, which often was either Shen, was some combination of Shen, Ezreal, or Thresh. I'm pretty sure this is going to change now. I think it's going to make much more sense to try to get Vanguards in and get a very tanky front line. And I think it's probably also going to make sense to experiment with a handful of other things that might be better. We'll have to see, but I'm interested in where this goes. I think I've tried to get Cyber 6 to work with Cybernetic before. Or, not Cyber 6, lol. Blade Master 6 to work in Cybernetic. I think that's doable, but you need a spat. I think without a spat item, you can't actually do it. Yeah, with a spat item, you can do it. Without a spat, you can't do it. So, that'll be something that I'll keep my eye on, is what Cybernetic becomes. So, overall, I don't think most of the others really get a change. The big thing is, like, the early game is going to change a little bit, because a lot of your early game champions are going to be... Your tier 3 units are going to be harder to find in the early game, so you're going to have to find more tier 1 and tier 2 champions to run into the later game. So these compositions probably are going to stay mostly the same, with exceptions to you might see more Rebels, you might see some Infiltrator flexes, and you might see some more Vanguard flexes. And I'm pretty sure Kale will probably be the best comp that you can play. Anyway, that's my thoughts. God, I made it 35 minutes. Damn it. I'm really trying to keep this under 20, guys. Really trying hard. Alright, I'll see you around. Peace.